Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Welcome to the podcast at FPP, Fakulti Pengajian Pendidikan. Yes, yeah. We are very honored today to have two guests, one imported from abroad, yeah, with all the experience, Professor Clive Dimmock from University of Glasgow, and another one is our own local leaders, Professor Ismi from Universiti Putra, Malaysia. We have picked a very timely topic, and of course, a very important one that is leading to change, challenges, and opportunities for educational leaders. And we've got the right person to talk about this academically, but also at the same time to address the current issues and pick up the challenges that we are facing now. To start with, Prof. Clive, should I? Prof. Clive or Dimmock? Oh, sorry, Clive. Yeah, Prof. Clive. Yeah. With the given experience, I know you have your take on the leadership challenge in education, be it the secondary or even higher educations. But reflecting upon your experience so far, the job that you have engaged in, how would you frame the leadership issues currently?
I think I'd frame them in the sense that the challenges are getting greater and greater, and the opportunities, likewise, I suppose, are equally greater or increasing. But it seems to me that if you were to weigh the two, the challenges are likely to be outweighing the opportunities. Because I think, rather pessimistically, leadership is probably not in a good place right now.
Okay. What kind of experience that you had before that allow you to say that?
So I've been a university professor in 3 continents: Europe, Asia, including Singapore and Hong Kong, and Australia. And then in the UK itself, in 3 countries: Wales, England, and Scotland, where I'm at the moment at Glasgow. And that broad international experience entitles me, I think, or has formed in me an opinion that we have lots of leaders, but unfortunately they're either poor or mediocre leaders. And people say to me, there's a shortage of leaders in education. I mean, both school and university. And I say, no. There's not a shortage of leaders. There's a shortage of high-performing leaders.
Okay. That'd be great to start with. There's a lot of interesting points that you raised there, Prof. If I get it correct, yeah, we are facing shortage of high performance, not shortage of leaders, but high performing one. That would be a point that we'll take up later. If we can get to Prof. Ismi, by the way of introducing yourself as well, how would you reflect upon what Prof. Clive is saying in the context of Malaysia?
Okay, thank you, Prof. Zainal. Prof. Clive, I do agree with you that school leadership and university leadership need some form of intervention in the kind that we need to prepare the leaders. You know, it's not just by experience, but they also need to be supported by proper talent development activities, like either the formal training, but also like mentoring, coaching, and whatnot. So same like what Clive mentioned about the need for more high performing leaders. We also having that challenge, but of course in Malaysia, we are blessed with this idea of having institutions responsible, to train school leaders and university leaders. Like school leaders, we have the Institute Amidin Baki, which basically responsible to train headmasters headmistress as well as the principals, in order for them to really acquire the sufficient knowledge and skills about leading their institution. And for the university leaders, we also have our National Higher Education Leadership Academy, where it functions to train potential leaders in terms of all the relevant skills needed, to lead and to manage their respective institutions. So I think yes, we have many who are interested to lead the institutions, but the question is, where can we find the high performing ones to make sure that our institutions are in good hands? So that's
Can I build on that?
Yes,
Is
please,
that
please,
possible?
please.
I think globally, the question of quality of leaders, which is what we're really talking about, is affected by principally two things. One is we're not, in many countries, there are exceptions, but in many countries, the best talent from universities is not, graduates are not going into teaching. And teaching is the recruiting ground, obviously, for principals and subsequent leaders, education leaders. So the first point, if we're very critical, is to say that the talent pool that we're working with notable exceptions, because there are, not far from here, for example, there's a country that has some of the highest caliber graduate going into teaching, but that's exceptional. The second thing is, and it's what Prof has just mentioned, is unfortunately, we do need to be critical about our relatively inadequate training of leaders. That is to say, all the evidence from research we get is that leaders such as school principals tell us that about 90% plus of what they do is learnt on the job, what we call tacit knowledge. Now, where does that leave the universities and the leadership training institutes? Because clearly the present practicing principals are saying to us, we don't really find your courses, formal courses, very helpful.
So sorry, Prof. So that will lead us to, I guess, one point whereby can we see the difference between how much have we given training before, maybe 10, 20 years before, and now that we need to address this? Because are we addressing that need of high performance, the change that need to be there? Because like you said before, that leadership is not something can be taught. So how beautiful is the curriculum does not necessarily means we'll get a good leader. But are we addressing this, or are we just talking about giving so much input at the end? We are not preparing them for that challenge out there.
Well, the first thing to say is, for example, a few systems in the world are really taking the notion of nurturing leaders seriously. So, for example, if I do mention, am I allowed to mention Singapore?
Yes, to the extent that you feel comfortable.
They, for example, right from scratch in the schools, when a young graduate goes into teaching in a school, he or she will be expected to choose a stream, one of three streams, and one of the three streams is a leadership stream. So in their early teaching careers, I mean, the ministry has an eye on who is in the profession and who they think has leadership capability or potential, and they will suggest, it will be a process of interaction between the individual teacher and the ministry, but they will suggest that they think they've got the potential to be a good leader. So they're nurtured all the way through, and with a fine-grained analysis of performance during that teacher's development, and only the best become leaders. So I think that's one aspect to it, that we need to take seriously spotting who has the potential, and then putting a lot of resources into, and Prof mentioned mentoring and coaching, which are, from research evidence, very
Yes.
very
Very
good
powerful.
ways
Yeah.
of training. But just to answer your question, I think what I'm seeing now, for example, I attend the Asia Leadership Roundtable, which is an invited guest list of the world's sort of Asian education experts. We meet every year, and one of our number is developing computer simulation for specifically for training leaders. So they're actually given computer game where they're school principal and they have to develop their school with all the stakeholders, vested interests, politicians, all the distractions and vested interests, and the game insists that the student, could be a principal learning, take into consideration all these contextual aspects, and the object is to get the school from here right up to performing at the top end of school performance. So it's that virtual real world, virtual reality that's being created now. And I'm quite excited. I mean, from what I've seen, I think this is really a breakthrough, and it's digitally related.
I guess this is something that may not be necessarily be easy to modularize. It means that you cannot structure it in a way to be given as a training in order to identify or nurture that kind of teacher or leader. So if I can get Ismi's your response, how I mean, we are not lacking of planning, we are not lacking of blueprint, we are not lacking of all what needs to be done.
Okay.
But what do you think there is missing there, so that we can clearly outline what else needs to be done in order to get that high performer that Prof. Clive was mentioning?
Okay. As usual, planning alone is not enough. Execution and translation is I think is the important thing, to make sure that whatever that we have planned will be translated accordingly. And like what I mentioned, and I agree with Clive, that when you talk about leadership training, it should not just be confined within the formal arrangement, but what is more important is how it is being practiced. We talk about coaching and mentoring just now, in how these people get the support system from seniors or colleagues to translate whatever that they have been trained in the formal setting, because leadership has to be practiced, and you tend to mature year by year based on the task that you have undertaken, as well as the environment that you have been exposed to. So I think that is something that we need to look into seriously, because at the moment, like it or not, we are still very much confined within the formal setup, where you get leaders to be trained, in like in a room, or in a very intellectual discourse kind of setting, but you also have to consider what you give them in terms of the hands-on and the practical perspective, because that is where they can really try out, learn from the mistakes, improve themselves. And I think this is the thing that we have to focus more on, so that the cycle will be more smooth and fully translated.
So I think that's right. And to build on it, we say internationally, one of the most important things a principal, for example, of a school can do is to actually develop leaders in their school.
They themselves will develop.
One of the most important jobs a principal of a school can do is to actually nurture leadership among their staff. Give them opportunities, for example, to run meetings, to run. I mean, one of the things that we're very keen on now is the creation of professional learning communities and networks, and also what we call collaborative research action groups. So in a typical school, you'd have groups of teachers working together to help each other develop lessons, practice together, go into each other's classrooms, evaluate, and research each other's teaching. Now, what this comes down to is, and it's back to your really, really good question earlier about, we've got, for example, the Malaysian Education Ministry with its blueprint, which has now just been superseded, I believe, for the next one. Before that's been really fully implemented, anywhere near fully implemented, I understand. So we've got another wave of change, policy change and reform before the old one has been fulfilled. And imagine what that confusion is given to teachers and schools. But the gap between, so policies changing very rapidly all the time, and expectations, not just of government, but the citizens and the electorate, they have higher expectations. So we have these two big stakeholders, the government responsible for policy, parents who are obviously the consumers of education through their children, and you've got the schools in the middle of this, and the gap's widening because the schools are not keeping up with the parent expectations, social expectations, and government policy reforms. So something's got to happen at the school institutional level to get things totally changing and developing. It comes back to human resource development. And you can't give, I mean, we all advocate internationally more responsibility down to decentralized, down to operational level, school level. But you can't do that until you have the resources, human resources, ready to accept those challenges.
In order to get that kind of leaderships, can we say that if they are to be led, grown in their ecosystem, developing other teachers to be leader, they definitely need autonomy there, which we don't have that much in terms of like how you develop your own leadership program, and that's so that you are the developer, the leader. And I guess that is quite missing here, that the room for you, because at the end of the day, it's the traits of the leader, it's the resilience of the leader. We have that, and we can meet whatever stakeholders demand, but we're not focusing on that. So experience-wise, how do we go about this?
So this is a big conundrum, isn't it, for Malaysia? China, on the other hand, is managing it quite well at the moment. A very centralized system, but it's massive, much bigger than Malaysia, obviously, but it's managing to devolve and decentralize, as far as I can see, quite successfully. And I think the one word that comes to mind is scaffolding. So you do it in a scaffolded way. First of all, you have to realize that the national culture, for example, of a country like Malaysia, you can't change culture. As a student of culture, I'm very appreciative and respectful of a country's, and the cultures differ hugely, we know. And so you've got your Malaysian culture, the tradition of centralized, top-down decision-making. And but while respecting that, I honestly, my experience of different countries, and I've worked a lot in Vietnam recently, which is 3 times the size of the population of Malaysia, and working with the government there. And they've realized that they're equivalent to your blueprint. They had a fundamental comprehensive education reform in 2013, the same time as your blueprint, not being implemented. And today's pressures on schools demand talented individuals in the school. You can't dictate from centre when you've got, I think it's something like 10,000 schools in Malaysia, 91 districts, something like 13 states and 3 federal territories, something like that. Anyway, it's complex. It's the geography of the country. You've got East and West Malaysia. The geography is complicated enough and complex. With all those schools and teachers, how on earth can you run a futuristic school model on the basis of continued high centralization? So it's a question of scaffolding it gradually, step by step, with the ministry, I think, if I may air my views, maintaining control over key things like core curriculum, religion, etc. But those areas of the curriculum that they feel they can offload to down through the states and districts, to the schools, then they should do that in a gradual. But at the same time, or before that, there's a great need for developing teachers to become more professional, and leaders, as we've been saying, to become more professional in their leadership. So you can't just delegate from the ministry without first developing. That's what I mean by scaffolding.
Scaffolding, yeah, correct. I know, Ismi, you have mentioned that before in the beginnings, that we have all the structure there and we have more or less identified what needs to be done. But at the moment, if you are given that magic wand, what would you do in terms of reflecting what is suggested to be there based on other experience?
Okay, I agree with Clive's assertion about scaffolding, but I think when you talk about scaffolding, there should be the right way when you want to centralize things and when you want to decentralize, to make sure that at one point you want some form of coordination, but it should not be too rigid up to the extent that you sort of like over control, how the micro level institutions should function. So I think in terms of coordination, yes, you need some kind of centralization, to make sure that the national expression, is always been adhered to. That is basically our hope, to sort of like unite everybody. But when it goes down to the state, to the district, at the school levels, I think there should be some form of autonomy given, to the school, to the university, to ensure that you can still celebrate that creativity and the diversity in terms of how the school and the university leaders want to lead the institutions. I think that is the debate that we still have about whether you want to give full autonomy or guided autonomy, to the leadership of the institutions. So I think it goes back to the understanding of centralization and decentralization that will be good for the growth of all the respective institutions.
Okay, I think we have set up some quite strong foundations there, that we need to look at the contextualization of the training is one, but the challenge is that between the two dichotomy, whether how much is autonomy to be given and how much it has to be centralized. But just to look at the potentials of or opportunities of can we see AI helping in, or the IT coming in terms of trying to mitigate or open up more opportunities in addressing this?
Well, that's one of the big questions, isn't it, facing
What we've got to say about AI.
Yeah. Dare I say no? I mean, you daren't, given the impact that AI is having in such a short time span so far. I mean, I'm going to be pessimistic, I think. I'm going to be pessimistic. I'm going to want to say and link the digital revolution, AI so-called, to reform, the big policy reforms that we've been talking about. And I'm going to want to argue, based on evidence, that the gap between the good schools and the bad schools, between the haves and the have-nots, is going to widen. I really do think that. All the evidence we've got from reforms such as yours in Malaysia, but certainly the ones I know in elsewhere in Asia, particularly Vietnam, is that reform, which has equity and inclusion as one part of its policy agenda, with the government highlighting, prioritizing it, but it's rhetoric. When it comes to it, because reform is so challenging to bring about, what happens is the schools with the money, with the resources, with parent support, will forge ahead and go digitize, use AI. Teachers will use it in the classroom. Students will be expected to use it in their assessments. The admin in the school will be driven by data, and so on and so forth. And the poor rural schools, without any of this, are going to get left behind.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid I have to be pessimistic. I don't want to be, but I am.
Unless, if I may add, unless we should do our very best to bridge the digital divide. I think, like it or not, data-driven decision making and actions are very important. It helps the institutions to be more strategic, and then sort of like more confident, because you have the data to support whatever that you plan and you do. But I think being artificial intelligence, I think AI cannot be left alone. You need the real intelligence from the leaders, to filter, to sort of like have a second opinion in terms of whatever AI is trying to assist the decision making and also the action. So I think one is to bridge the digital divide, making sure that all schools, as much as possible, will get sufficient amount of AI support, but what is more important is the real intelligence from the leaders and the community of the institutions, to make sure that whatever that you decide and you act upon is based on the combination of both real intelligence and artificial intelligence.
And how much are we able to make use of that would depend on the leaders that we have in school. I would agree, I do have a bit of pessimistic as well when it comes to AI, but I would be addressing it or looking at it from the context of sustainable development, in a way that whatever technology, whatever development that we have, you always widen the gap, that risk of doing that. But then the question would be, if we have a good leader or high performing one, they will be able to addressing that. So the question is, a government initiative will always be supporting of AI, but it needs a real contextual and localizations of the AI that is happening in that particular school or rural area, which a policy will always be a general one. But at the end of the day, the fate of that school will always depend on the leader. So again, the question goes back to how good are the leader and the training that they have.
Exactly.
So it will be a continuous question that will always be looking at this. So we've got another 15 minutes. If we can get some more practical suggestions that you have seen around the world.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think AI, I'm going to actually, I'd hate to be totally pessimistic here on this podcast, so I'm going to be optimistic now. But one of the things I would say AI brings closer to fruition is the idea of personalized learning. And with that notion of personalized learning goes some strong equity element, obviously. I'm thinking of the slow learners, what we in the UK call the achievement gap between, broadly speaking, the middle class, well-off children, and the poor, particularly rural working class, if you like. And at the moment, the gap is widening there. We've been trying to pursue policies, governments have been trying to pursue policies to close that gap for over a decade now, without any success whatsoever, I'd say. However, AI, I think, does bring about a vision that I can see probably over the next 10, 15, 20 years. I'm not talking about short term, obviously, where every child will have a personalized learning path through the curriculum, that the data analytics will be there to support evidence-based decision making from the teachers, who will work collaboratively on looking at each child's progress, where they're having difficulties, and immediately the AI will be able to respond to each child's difficulties without them being slowed, their progression being slowed up, for long periods of time. So I do believe that pedagogy and student learning can capitalize on tremendous benefits that AI will bring about if, as you say, schools either are given the resources or are allowed to generate the resources to harness those tremendous benefits, potential benefits.
Ismi, can we see that while we may, assuming we've got that good leaders there, but then it can be a question of how good are we in managing it? Meaning that we identify the big potential and support of the AI, but if it is not managed properly, it wouldn't be able to get into addressing that issues. So the gap between good leaders and good manager, and we may get many good school manager, but not good leader. So in addressing this AI, how do you see the difference between the two?
That's why I think this is where real intelligence comes in. I mean, like it or not, the school leader must play his or her leader and managerial role equally well. At one point you want to ensure consistency. You want to ensure that things are properly coordinated and whatnot. But at the same time, you also have to be more creative, more critical in terms of how you want to develop your school or your university. So I think this is where good leaders are needed. Even within the resource constrained environment, you can still find ways, in order to bridge the gap that we mentioned just now. Regardless of whether you are in a well-to-do environment or the other way around, whether you're in rural or urban, as long as you have good leaders who can be very strategic, very forward-looking, things can become wonders. So I strongly believe that it goes back to the kind of leaders that we have. Of course, resources are important, but in order for the resources to be managed well, you need to have good leaders, that can really optimize things and do more with less, for that matter.
I know, Prof. Clive, you've got a lot more to share, but just to direct one point of tapping into your experience and wisdom as well. Bureaucracy will always take away the leadership skills of school leader, because sometimes they're occupied with meeting the bureaucratic need, while they've got that potential to develop or to be unleashed, but they have got to attend to a lot of administrative issues at the school. So how do you handle this?
Yes, AI undoubtedly can help on that side of things, can't it? In terms of record keeping, all the routine timetabling, all these routine things which people can spend weeks, and teachers can spend weeks and weeks organizing the timetable manually, so to speak. So clearly there are going to be big advantages and benefits from AI in the administration side, but it's odd because all these wonderful potential breakthroughs bring even greater challenges to leaders and leadership. Now we were talking earlier about the need for better training of leaders, and now we're saying, oh, by the way, besides doing much better training of what they're already doing, they need to take on board AI and knowledge and understand. Because how can you be a leader of a school with all your teachers encouraging pedagogic and learning changes, personalized this and so on, if you as the leader don't know what's going on or understand it even? I'm not saying they should be technical wizards. In fact, a bad story will serve my point. We did some research in Scotland on school principals about 5 years ago. And what we found was that school principals were just about the least knowledgeable about computing in their school. And we said to them, well, how do you form a school policy in regard to computers and the use of computers in school? I leave that to my computer teacher. They wash their hands of it.
Yeah.
That can't happen, continue to happen with AI. I mean, if AI is, we're not just talking about computers, we're talking about AI, which is going to clearly affect every aspect of teaching and learning. So it's impossible to conceive of school leaders, principals saying, oh, I know nothing, by the way, I know nothing about AI whatsoever. I'll leave it to my AI man, specialist or woman in the school.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if I may add, it's not about being tech savvy, but as long as you know how to optimize, the AI affordances to help you with your decision making and your action, that would be sufficient enough for the leaders.
But maybe will it be the case that sometimes we got too much emphasis on them to be knowing about technical aspects of AI rather than the bigger spirit of AI, how AI can support? Means that whenever they are called to the training, so instead of them being forced to pass to AI, so there is a program that will be introducing them what is AI. But that program is missing the bigger picture, making them a leader in AI, not on the technical aspect, but beyond that.
Yes.
Which I guess that's the a bit of delayed response in terms of designing program.
Yeah.
So I just want to tap Ismi, if you see that kind of like training is given. We have a lot of training now. I mean, everyone is supposed to be equipped for all AI, but the missing component is the bigger perspective. What Prof. Clive was mentioning.
Yeah, because I believe that what is more important is the functionality aspect of the AI rather than the form and structure. Sometimes we get confused, in terms of whether we want to provide the intervention in the form of structure or the functionalities. I think what is more important for the leaders is to know how to see the functionalities of it, so that they know how AI can assist them, whenever necessary. So I think that rather than to go for more technical form and structure of AI, they should be given the opportunity to try out and understand how they can optimize it for the benefit of their institution.
Just a bit of reality check, Prof. Going around Asian country, for example, assumption is that we get quite a senior people will be a school leader, and the senior one sometimes associated with less savvy,
Not tech savvy.
and not tech savvy enough. But how do you see this as constraint? Meaning assumption that if they are senior, maybe they are not good enough in savvy, so they will be using a lot of time to train them on that. So can we somehow change towards a more younger one as a school leader, so that assuming that we get a better performance in that context?
Well, I don't think age should come into it. I mean, I know some systems rely very much on seniority.
Yeah.
And you'll know those systems, but my experience in other, well, I'd be specific, Australia, UK in particular, that I know well, are that principals are now being appointed even early 30s of big schools on big salaries. So the salary has to reflect the responsibility. So I don't, and of course the other breakthrough is many more women are coming into leadership now, which is good. And so age shouldn't really matter. If you've got the ability and you've shown that you can, it's not about academic cleverness, leadership. It's about, I met the dean yesterday, for example, we were talking about this, and he was saying that, and I've done some research with vice chancellors, and you'd think vice chancellors would be the cleverest academic, but they're not. They're not the cleverest academic. They're not the Nobel. Very few vice chancellors ever won a Nobel Prize, and they admit to that. So they're along with your reflected point that leadership involves a balanced personality, an ability to be a good academic, but not necessarily an outstanding international scholar, but a very good academic nonetheless, but an ability to have great interpersonal skills and social emotional intelligence. And that we haven't talked about, because that is so important and increasingly important going forward.
You're referring to the emotional intelligence, yeah. On that note, I think quite a number of words coming up now to replace or to offer an alternative to artificial intelligence, something like authentic intelligence, ancestral intelligence, all recalling the intelligence that should have there or should already been there, just that with tech, we thought with AI. Towards concluding, Prof, another 5 minutes, what would be your wisdoms in addressing this educational leadership? Because we were saying in the beginning, leadership cannot be taught. It has to be caught, it has to be acquired on the ground with a local contextual setup. So if you want to move forward, looking what's happening now, as you're saying that in the beginning, that is more of like becoming greater challenge now. So in addressing that greater challenge, what would be one or two words that you can say about that?
So if I may, I'm going to criticize government policies, not necessarily Malaysian government, but most governments. If I'm critical, I would say my understanding and analysis of government education reform policies is naive in the extreme. It's naive and simplistic because the policy formulators, whether they be officials or politicians or both, are mainly concerned with putting in place a form of documentation that is a blueprint for the whole school system, maybe 30,000 schools, however many schools. In other words, they are decontextualizing policy. And what needs to happen there, in my judgment, is much more sophisticated. And maybe we haven't talked about, very few people have talked about how AI can improve government policy making, for example. But my goodness, there is such a need for governments to come into the 21st century in their education reform and do policy that is feasible for schools and others to actually implement. So that's the first of my 2 points. Yeah. We need much more sophisticated, variable government policy. So instead of having a blueprint for the whole system, we need variations of that policy to suit different contexts of schools. The second thing is, and this is my last point, is really to reiterate what I've said and what we've both said here about the need for much more effective professional teaching and leadership in the schools. And that comes down to changing our professional development experiences. I would love to see much more school-focused, school-based professional development, which is contextualized, where teachers learn together in professional learning communities, and where teachers research their practice. And all of these are ways of developing teachers and school leaders' competencies and capabilities, which sort of builds capacity in the school level to undertake the implementation that's expected of them by government policy. So I'm looking at two levels of the five, because I'm not looking at state or district and so on. I'm looking at policy, national policy reform, and I'm looking at school level and wanting to see change at both those levels to bring about a much more coherent, feasible education system going forward.
Okay, thank you, Prof. By the way, by way of a bit of like trying to derive points from that, one is more sophisticated policies, and for that we need leaders that can address or translate that policies well into their contextual. And for that, we need PLC, professional learning communities, for that. So from your side, Prof. Ismi, just to reflect again on Malaysians and realities in Malaysia, how have we done this, or we are doing this, or we trying, or we need to do this? The 2 points that Prof. Clive was mentioning.
Yeah, I do agree. I mean, we have good blueprint, good policy, but like what I mentioned earlier, execution and translation, how it trickles down from the national to state, district, and to school. It needs internalization from all levels, to ensure that even at the school level, the community really understand what the policy wants them to do, to implement, to make sure that whatever aspiration is being executed and achieved accordingly. So I think that's the missing link between what is planned and what is being translated. So if only we can focus seriously on that translation and execution, I think that's where we can see a successful implementation of the policy. So that is my first point. My second point, about when you mentioned about um, what is needed. We talk a lot about artificial intelligence, and you mentioned about authentic intelligence. Some of the buzzword these days. That's why I see intelligence is very important. You talk about emotional intelligence. You talk about the intellect of the leaders. I think intelligence is very important. Of course, next would be the integrity, of the leaders, and then determination, making sure that whatever that you plan and you announce is being executed well. And then I think the third one should be more about your confidence in terms of your decision and also your action, to make sure that uh, people are confident with the leaders, and they know that they are in good hands, because these are high performing and able leaders. And of course, I think another point is about, I think Clive mentioned about EI. I strongly believe we talk a lot about empathy these days. How uh, the sociability, comes in, the ability of the leader to socialize appropriately, stakeholder engagement. This is another thing that is very important. How you make sure that you can bring up yourself in whatever avenues you are in, and engage and touch the hearts and empower people that you are engaging with. I think those are the things that I really hope that our leaders would have. This is also a reminder to myself. With that only, we can see more high performing leaders, inshallah.
Thank you so much for both guests who have shared a lot on our topic today, leading through change, challenges and opportunities for educational leaders. There's no way that I can somehow summarize again, which I think we just mentioned very well. But my parting words would be that at the end of the day, is a combination of leadership and management, and like what Ismi was saying, that education is about the heart. If you touch the heart, then you touch something else. And Aristotle put it very well, that education without education of the heart is not education. So with that remarks, we like to thank again for both guests. So we hope we have shared with you a lot of wisdom and experience that may be useful, hopefully useful for us, in order to have a good breed of UPMs, graduates of educational leaderships. Thank you so much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you.
Thank you,
Ismi.
Zainal. Thank you, Clive.
Good. Thank